Jamar is here, and Miss Mylene, and of course our invited speaker for today. Um, we're continuing the conversation, and just a recap of what we had since the time we finished our short-term program with with this group. So this is the 11th session, post session, since we started last year with the presentation of Sir John. We missed him, and the original, the group together with Pasita, being 14, and then we had
Awi,
Awi, yes,
you miss them?
Ruth. I saw being 2 weeks ago in a social work conference, national conference of social workers.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
Also, Gemma, although Gemma is here, we had Miss Josie Cabahog during the post-session 7 last October, and then Philip Albis last December, and the very, very productive session of Maria Mercedes Arzadon of UP Diliman last January, and of course, recently, last month, Mr. Elwood Prias. I'm just browsing through the presentations was that were held in the last 12 months. This one was by Miss Dr. Rowena Hibanada, talking about making thinking visible in Catch-up Friday activities for her values education major teacher education students at the Philippine Normal University. And of course, my presentation last June, maximizing the power of making thinking visible in my teacher education language and literature classes. And thank you, Ms. Mitch, for facilitating during the time. Um, I gave a little reflection on the impact of Project Zero as to the power of making thinking visible. Then last August, we had, of course, last July, Mitch shared with us the ESL, EFL, MTB workshop in Bicol. And then Jemar, Mr. Jemar Nocos, who is a computer scientist from Bicol as well, shared with us the making thinking visible in technology. And of course, the presentation of Ms. Kabahog last October in relation to her classes. And then last December, Mr. Albis's presentation on utilizing and thinking routines in relation to different subject areas, specifically mathematics. And of course, the mother tongue-based multilingual education in the Philippines by Dr. Ched Arzadon of the College of Education of UP. And just recently, the sharing of Mr. Elwood Prias. And so today, we're going to continue the conversation as we are invited for another session, this time with Assistant Professor Maria Purificacion Ganaban, commonly known in our university as Miss Dang, Professor Dang, who is now a Doctor of Education major in Innovative Educational Management major at the University of Makati. And she also finished her Master of Arts in English Language Education, specializing in second language teaching at the De La Salle University, Manila. But her bachelor's program was with the Lyceum of the Philippines, Manila, for her bachelor or BS in Foreign Service. Miss Dang teaches English in the university as well as foreign language, specifically French. So she teaches French because in our previous curriculum, we were offering the last batch. The last batch of this curriculum are graduating this year, um, where we offer different languages depending on their choice. We had Japanese, Korean, Spanish. There was even Latin. I was a former priest taught us the course, and Miss Dang was one of those teaching French. Um, and today she's going to talk about automaticity in language learning. Um, please welcome Miss Dang Ganaban.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sulayo. Let me first share my screen. Allow me to, could I share my screen po, Dr. Sulayo?
Uh, I'm
Okay.
not really sure.
Yes, I think you can share. There you go.
Yes, I'm okay. So, is it already visible on your end?
Yeah.
Okay. So once again, good morning, everyone. So I am so happy to be here with you to talk about something very important in learning and using English, which is automaticity. I don't think for me it's actually a big word, but it simply means doing something without having to think too hard about it. So let's start exploring how this idea can actually help us encourage our students to become confident in speaking English. So, actually, being the director of the Center for Languages Development, as I reflect on how to encourage my students to speak in English, I actually keep on coming back to the idea that students have to achieve automaticity for this advocacy to truly materialize. I'm constantly bothered by the fact that they may never reach a genuine level of confidence until they experience this level of automaticity. So today, we're going to analyze the concept, although it's somehow technical, but this is actually the first concept that I learned and encountered during my years of study at De La Salle University, Manila, while taking my master's in English language education, major in teaching English as a second language. So, to begin this discussion, let us first ask ourselves, what exactly is automaticity? Okay, so what is automaticity? When you check this nomenclature on YouTube, you will find out that this is the ability to recognize and produce language effortlessly and accurately without deliberate thought. It happens when a learner no longer needs to consciously process grammar rules, vocabulary, or sentence structures, allowing for fast, fluent communication. So it means to say that, a person can understand and speak the language naturally and smoothly without having to stop and to think about grammar rules or what words to use. So it's like, when we are driving a car or riding a bike, we don't really think about every little move. We just have to do it, right? In the same way, when someone reaches automaticity in English or any language, they can actually speak and understand it quickly and confidently because It has already become a natural part of how their brain works. Um, this is from Google, but of course, when we actually itong automaticity, it became a focal point in research for several decades, no, with many influential scholars. For example, si Schneider, Ellis, si Doty, De Kaiser, and others. They actually shaped our understanding of how skills become automated, especially in the context of second language acquisition. So let's have, for example, the seminal work of Schifrin and Schneider. Sorry. So these two researchers, they are often credited with developing the foundational model of automaticity in cognitive psychology. Their work described the transition from controlled processing, which requires conscious effort, to automatic processing, which is fast and effortless in tasks such as reading and learning. Another researcher is John R. Anderson's. He came up with an idea of cognitive skill acquisition theory, wherein he focused on how automaticity develops through practice. His ACTR model suggests that with enough practice, complex tasks become automatic as they are stored in long-term memory. And then in 1994 came Rod Ellis, one of my favorite theorists, or researchers of second language acquisition. He became, of course, our key figure in SLA research. Because he contributed significantly to understanding how automaticity plays a role in acquiring second language skills. He even explored how language learners transition from consciously thinking about grammar rules to using language more automatically in communication. And then in 2005, this Ellis, of course, and Schneider again made significant contributions to our understanding of how automatic processing develops in language learners. Their research underscores how, through repeated exposure and practice, learners shift from controlled processes requiring conscious thought to automaticity, allowing them to perform language tasks smoothly and with little mental effort. So this shift is essentially enriching fluency in a second language. So their focus is more of repeated exposure and practice. Another well-known work is done by Catherine Doughty. Okay, she particularly focused on form in language instruction. She has provided a deeper understanding of how learners can develop automaticity. She even emphasized that meaning-focused communication, where learners are encouraged to focus on meaning rather than just form, can significantly enhance language fluency over time by encouraging learners to notice and internalize grammar and vocabulary naturally. And then in 2004, we have Bill Van Patten. Okay. His work focused on the development of automaticity in language learning. He emphasizes the importance of processing input without conscious awareness to develop fluency and automaticity in language. Now, I have De Kaiser. He became a pivotal figure in understanding automaticity through his research on the power law of practice and the cognitive processes involved in skill acquisition. His studies show how the gradual shift from controlled to automatic processing is central to mastering complex cognitive skills like language. De Kaiser also highlighted the challenges faced by adult learners in achieving automaticity, as the process tends to be slower compared to younger learners due to the more effortful cognitive processes involved. Thus, he posited that the ultimate example of automaticity is probably our ability to use the language through a complex chain of mental operations carried out in a fraction of a second. Second, we can convert complex thoughts and feelings into sound waves, and our interlocutor can convert them back into thoughts and feelings with the same amazing speed. Given the complexity of this skill and the speed with which it is used, it is not surprising that it takes years to acquire and that learning a new language in adulthood is a slow and frustrating process. So let's have let's think about, when we talk to our friends. Let's say you talk to your friends. You don't usually stop, right, to think about every single word before you say it. You don't really have to um, think of the words. You just talk normally and continuously. That's automaticity in action. So it's like your brain is doing something really complex. It takes your ideas or feelings, turns into words, right? And sends those words out of your mouth as sound waves. Then yung friends, yung brain ng friend mo will hear those sound waves and understand the words. And then she will get or he will get the message all in a blink of an eye, right? So whenever you talk to your friend, you're just doing this naturally because you've been practicing since you were little. You didn't become fluent in your language overnight, actually. Um, in fact, it took years of listening, speaking, and using it every day. That's why talking in your first language feels easy now because your brain has learned to do all of this automatically without much effort. But when you're learning a new language, for example, English, it's not your first, so it's a different story. You often have to pause, to think, about vocabulary. You have to check your grammar. And of course, sometimes you worry about your pronunciation. So your brain is still working hard on every step. That's why when you speak a second language, especially for adults, it can be slow in process. And for them, it may be stressful. So yung automaticity is not yet achieved. Same goes with, when you're driving a car or a bike. It takes a lot of practice to make something automatic. Once it becomes automatic, though, you stop thinking so hard about it, and that's when confidence grows. Yan. So, oops, sorry. The Kaiser actually came up with characteristics of performance that lead to the conclusion about automaticity. That's why he came up with a summary in a table that presents an overview of what different researchers have mentioned explicitly as criteria of automaticity. I will not really dwell on this, but I just want you to look at the table. On the first column, these are the researchers, and let's just focus on the top portion of the table, wherein you will see the different characteristics of automaticity. So they describe automaticity as fast, parallel, effortless, capacity-free, unintentional. It may also be result of consistent practice, little interference from or with, unconscious, always memory retrieval. Okay? So according to De Kaiser, the most ubiquitous finding about the acquisition of cognitive skills recognized by proponents of any kind of theory of automatization is the power law of practice. So he actually cited Newell and Rosenblum in 1981, Confer, Newell 1990, and then Rosenblum and Newell 1987, documented in great detail how many fine-grained longitudinal studies had established how the acquisition of a cognitive skill is reflected in not just any kind of gradual learning curve, but in a curve defined by a power function. So I mentioned the power law practice. just to give light to this particular term, this refers to a pattern that has been observed when people practice and get better at a task over time. We have an old adage, right, that practice makes perfect. So essentially, the more you practice something, the faster you improve at it at first. However, as you continue practicing, this has to, be taken into consideration that your improvements tend to slow down. This is not a simple linear relationship, take note, like improving by the same amount each time, but rather a curved relationship described by a power function. In simpler terms, early practice shows big improvements, of course, but the more you practice, the less noticeable your progress becomes. This type of curve is seen in many cognitive skills as they become automatic over time. I also, De Kaiser also emphasized on the performance fluency. Okay, he put forth that this is the observable speed, accuracy, and fluidity of skill execution, which indicate that the skills is fluent, arises from a less easily observed underlying cognitive fluency. This cognitive fluency reflects the efficiency with which the processes responsible for the skill as a whole are executed. One important aspect of cognitive fluency is the degree to which the underlying processes are executed in an automatic as opposed to a controlled fashion. So when we see someone doing something skillfully, like speaking smoothly or playing an instrument without hesitating, it's because yung brain nila has already learned how to handle the necessary steps efficiently. This only happens when the brain can do most of the work automatically without needing to consciously think about every move. So, the smoother someone performs, the more their brain is operating on automatic processes, making their skills more fluent and natural. Okay, so performance fluency, of course, I think I already talked about it. So it's the smoothly and accurately someone performs a skill, okay, when it is visible to others. So our focus is more of speed, accuracy, and fluidity, okay? So in other words, how well and how fast someone can perform a task without hesitation or error. And then the other term that was mentioned is the cognitive fluency. So it has something to do with mental processes that make performance fluency possible. Although this does not directly can be observable like performance fluency, but it represents the efficiency with which the brain carries out the tasks involved in executing the skill. Let's say, for example, when you perform a task automatically, like as you speak in English fluently or driving, it's because your brain has become very efficient at processing the steps involved. So, automatic versus controlled. There are actually two types of cognitive processes that can influence how a skill is performed. It could be through automatic process. I mentioned it many times. So these are mental operations that happen quickly, effortlessly, and without conscious thought, like recognizing words while reading or riding a bike. The more automatic a process is, the less mental effort is required to perform it. On the other hand, when we talk of controlled processes, this require more conscious thought and mental effort. For example, when you're learning a new language and have to think about grammar rules or vocabulary, you're engaging in a controlled process. Now, how does automaticity develop? So upon doing some research, I came up with this steps. Of course, there must be repetition and exposure, meaning to say there must be a frequent use of a language, which will help the words and phrases become second nature. You must have practice and application. Speaking, listening, reading, and writing must be regularly be practiced because this will solidify automatic responses. Cognitive streamlining over time, the brain reduces the effort needed to recall words, allowing for smoother communication. So, to emphasize on how we will be able to achieve automaticity, we have to have this, you know, we have to undergo this procedure. We should have initial learning. So, this is the conscious effort. It means to say that you are aware of what you are going to do. So, as you know, as a learner, if you are if it is your first time to learn the language, let's say in our case Filipino, our first language is Filipino. So our if we're going to learn English, it is a new skill for us, so we have to consciously think about each step or rule involved. Okay, so we have to carefully consider grammar rules, or translating words in our head. At this stage, we are relying heavily on controlled processes, which take up more mental effort and focus. Repetition and practice, on the other hand, is another, this is the second step. We have to do repetition. It is actually the key to moving from conscious thought to automaticity. Meaning to say, the more the learner practices, the more the brain starts to recognize patterns and internalize them. Practice helps to strengthen neural connections, which gradually reduces the cognitive load required to perform the skill. So, as the learner practices, the task becomes less effortful and they can do it with less conscious focus. Overcoming errors and refining skills. Of course, it's very normal to speak in English, and if it is your first time, or you're not really into it, you will encounter a lot of mistakes. And it is for me, I really encourage my students to speak the language naturally, even if it is in a baroque tone or approach. It doesn't matter, and I come up with the rule that nobody uh, makes a fun of your classmate when they speak in English, so that there will be no hesitation on their end. They will not feel, scared of being embarrassed in the class. Why? Because making mistakes during practice is an important part of the learning process. These errors help the learner refine their technique and understand where their cognitive processes need to become more efficient. The learner should engage in deliberate practice where they challenge themselves by working on the more difficult aspects of the skill, such as vocabulary, pronunciation, or grammar in the language learning. Next is reduced conscious thought. So shifting to automaticity. So of course, if there's already a consistent practice and experience, the learner will now begin to reduce conscious effort needed to for the task execution. In language learning, for instance, this might mean that the learner no longer has to think about grammar rules, but can instead produce sentences naturally. So the learner shifts from controlled processing, where they are actively thinking about every step, to automatic processing, where they can perform the task with ease, accuracy, and speed without thinking about it much. Now, fluency and integration. Actually, if we're going to think about it, as you achieve that level of automaticity, you may consider yourself as a fluent speaker of English. Meaning to say, you can perform the task quickly, you can think accurately and fluidly. So you don't need to stop and think at each step because of the cognitive processes, no? It already become automatic. The more the learner practices in varied contexts, for example, using the language in different situations, the more automatic their skills become. Okay, so sustained practice, maintaining automaticity. This is a must for me. To maintain automaticity, the learner must engage in regular practice. It is true that when we do not use the language, like me, there was a time in the past wherein I can really talk to French people. That's why I can apply the rules and the vocabulary that I learned. But nowadays, I don't have any French friends who can talk to me. That's why my skill in speaking the French language is starting to deteriorate. So the over time, no, use and exposure help sustain the automatic skills and ensure that they remain fluent. Now, so I was thinking when I was, preparing this presentation, I was thinking about critical thinking. How am I going to relate this to automaticity? So at first, I thought of this to nomenclatures as opposing concepts. But to think of it deeply, I realize that they are closely related and complement each other in the learning process. So here's how they connect. So for the initial learning phase, if we're going to talk of the controlled processing, because you have to think about the grammar rules, about everything. You have to be cautious about your pronunciation. So this is the early stages of a learning skill, right? The learner needs to use critical thinking to process new information. If you will not be critical, it will be, difficult for you to absorb the rules of grammar. So at this point, the learner is consciously analyzing, evaluating, and problem solving. So actively thinking about grammar rules, vocabulary, and the structure of the language. This requires controlled cognitive processes where the learner is deeply engaged and reflecting on each step, which is crucial for understanding complex ideas. Next, so in other words, when we talk of this one, right, the controlled process, they are very connected. They are very related with each other. You have to use your critical thinking skill to be able to do the controlled process of thinking the language. So achieving automaticity, efficiency, and execution. So as learners practice and become more skilled, the need for critical thinking in each step of the task decreases. Okay, why? The goal of automaticity is to make these processes so well practiced that they become automatic, requiring little conscious thought. So there's still critical thinking, but it is not too much. It is not, that rigid, not anymore, because you already start to achieve automaticity. However, while automaticity involves efficiency and fluid execution, critical thinking is still important, but it shifts focus. So instead of thinking about basic steps or rules, the learner may use critical thinking to adapt, to solve problems, and to understand the bigger picture of the task. For example, a learner who has mastered speaking a language might use critical thinking to consider nuances in conversation, cultural context, or how to adjust language used to different audiences. Something like you are now going to apply discourse analysis. You are, to be sensitive of the cultural differences when you are talking to different kinds of people. Now, balancing both. So, in skilled activities such as speaking fluently in a language, automaticity allows the person to perform with speed, accuracy, and ease. Critical thinking comes into play. Why? When the learner needs to evaluate or adjust their actions, especially in unpredictable situations. For instance, when a learner has mastered basic conversation in a language, but then encounters a new or complex situation like a debate or argument, they will need to apply critical thinking to navigate that situation effectively. Adaptation and problem solving. So, as automaticity reduces the need for basic cognitive effort, critical thinking can help the learner adapt to new challenges or solve problems that arise during performance. So, for example, we have a fluent speaker of a language, which may automatically produce correct sentences. But if they need to handle a complex argument or unfamiliar topic, critical thinking skills help them organize their thoughts, evaluate evidence and craft their response thoughtfully. So, interdependence. Critical thinking is key in developing the foundations of a skill, especially when learning is in its initial stages, where evaluation and problem solving are crucial. On the other hand, automaticity helps free up cognitive resources, which allow the learners to apply their critical thinking to higher order tasks like problem solving or creative thinking while still executing the basic task effortlessly. In essence, automaticity provides the mental space for critical thinking to occur more fluidly and without distraction. So, in summary, critical thinking is crucial during the learning and problem solving stages, especially when the learner is not yet fluent. As the learner practices and develops automaticity, critical thinking is no longer required for routine tasks but becomes essential when adjusting to new challenges or applying the learned skill in more complex or unpredictable situations. Automaticity and critical thinking are therefore complementary. Automaticity allows for smooth and efficient task execution, while critical thinking ensures adaptability and deeper understanding when needed. And that ends my presentation about automaticity and its relation to critical thinking. I hope that I gave you insights about this particular topic of learning a language. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Miss Dang. That's how many slides? 38 slides, I believe. There you go,
42
Miss,
slides.
42 slides. So Miss Dang presented to us the automaticity in specifically, but in the invitation we were to, so the invitation mentioned by Mitch last April 1 that Miss Dang will be presenting her experience with language learning and critical thinking. So I believe the group would like to hear more about, although those are very important inputs as to how learners, particularly second language learners, Filipinos in particular, learn the language and how they utilize it in context, especially if they are in their classrooms and eventually cascaded when they go to their respective fields after graduation. So I guess the group would like to hear more about your experience or experiences in the language classroom. It may not be English, maybe you have um, mentioned a little about your experience in teaching French. But in this case, of course, our target is for our learners to become critical thinkers and eventually, with the help of MTV, could be another tool for us as language teachers to enhance more the thinking ability of our students. So the
Yeah.
group may ask questions, Mitch.
Yes, I thank you very much, Mam Gananon. That was a very interesting presentation and helpful to hear the challenges of achieving automaticity in a second language. I guess my question to start with is based on your experience with students in your class. Do you feel like your students have the ability to express ideas, critical thinking ideas, um, in English? Or, because I think one of the challenges that all countries face is what should be the primary language for learning. This group seeks to promote the idea of making thinking visible, i.e., people need to be able to describe their thoughts in language or in writing or through illustration. And I wonder if you haven't achieved automaticity in a language, can you do it in that language? Or is it better to use the mother tongue, particularly in the early levels, as you highlighted?
To answer
Lots of
your
questions
question,
there.
okay, so to answer your question, Sir Mitch, actually, when we talk of automaticity, that's the problem of our students in the Philippines. Why? Most especially actually in our university to be particular, and of course, I'm pertaining to my students based on my experience. My students would normally ask permission, like, if you are talking to them in English, and then when you ask them something, they would ask you, Miss, pwede pong sumagot sa Tagalog. Can I explain myself in Filipino? That's their normal statement. Why? Because for them, they will be able to express their thoughts comprehensively if they are using their first language.
Yes.
So th- that's why I came up with this idea. How will I help them? No? How will I help them to really achieve that kind of fluency? And I think I still have to do a lot of research about this, and how will I be able to apply this to them because of this particular dilemma. Sometimes we cannot really avoid but to code switch, because there were times in the past that I was evaluated by my students that they do not understand the lesson. Why? Because I'm speaking in English completely. I don't really talk to them in Filipino. So when I learned about it, I started to code switch, especially if the concept has to be highlighted. I have to turn the English, discussion to Filipino for them to understand me. That's the problem. I also encountered students who are thinking in Filipino and then they will translate it into English. That's why I felt that these students are really having hard time, because the tendency in translating is for you not to really come up with the exact meaning that you want to relate to the interlocutor or to the person that you are talking to. Those things.
Thank
So
you.
it's really a problem, and hopefully, I will find a way on how to deal with the difficulties of my students to, to speak the English fluently.
Do you think that I think one of the findings from the PISA test was that in general the education system in the Philippines has not been successful in promoting critical thinking skills, even from an early age. And so, do you think it makes more sense based on your own experience at the university level to use mother tongue to promote critical thinking before evolving to another language? I think I attached to our group two articles. One um, that was written by a consultant who was talking about the education system, choose being clear about the language that is used in instruction to more effectively promote critical thinking. And then the other article was from Singapore, which has an educate, and they're one of the best performing countries for PISA, and they focus on all of their classes promoting critical thinking skills. And even though those students may be bilingual, and even if their mother tongue language is not English.
I'm also trying to consider that move. I don't know if they will, really pursue that. I think it is important to start with the mother tongue. Especially when you're teaching different concepts, it will be easier for I think we have to start with the basic when they already learn the basic, and that's the time that you move forward to a more difficult task. And it must be done using our mother tongue, our first language, for them to understand, really to absorb really the meaning that we want to teach them. So I just don't know why we really have to insist to, to use English as a medium of instruction in every classroom in the Philippines. Although, of course, since it's globalization era, we have to keep abreast with this, need to be to have that competitive edge. But I think, especially as for the younger, pupils, younger students or learners, I think we really have to start first in teaching them the important concepts using our mother tongue. And once they already learned everything, we can introduce to them the use of English as their second language, something like that. That's for
Yeah,
me.
thank
That's
you.
just my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure other people have questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mitch, for those pointed
Hello.
clarifications. Any other queries or point of information, perhaps? Maybe you have other experiences you'd like to share in terms of the topic discussed today. Miss Marie Chris, you
Oh
want to say
yeah.
something?
I think just my experience more here in university in US. Um so i so grammar is not anymore like a priority in even in English classes here. Because I think a lot of that you can at least the written one you can actually do a lot of the what is that AI and stuff. So what we are really at least I know when I heard this from 10 years ago, I remember like one colleague, we have a student, I'm in the chemistry department. So one of our student was an English instructor. Like she wanted to switch to chemistry, but she's been teaching English. Like she's actually an instructor. And then she said, yeah, like we don't teach grammar anymore. I mean, that's not the focus. And I'm like, so what do you guys teach in English 101? You know what I mean? Um, so, but it's really the logic, the logic from one. So I think that's really the critical thinking, and it does make sense after, 10 years now that, um, with AI, you can really, even in Word, it will just correct your, your sentence a little bit. So I think maybe in Philippines, not, I mean, grammar is important. There's definitely basic skills, but not to focus so much on that, but really the quality of the thinking that goes into the sentence, for example, the reasoning. So and not just a regurgitation. I always remember like when I was a student, you know, back in Philippines, like if we have definition of terms, it has to be exactly how the textbook wrote it. It's like it's wrong if it's not the same as the textbook. It's like, but here we really don't encourage that. We really want the student to define the term in their own words. So I think that um, so I would, I think the automaticity and the critical thinking. So that's just my general thought. And again, like with the AI now, it really democratized it for a lot of us, especially a lot of the technical part. And so so like with my students, we focus so much on the level. So the levels, for example, like number one is the content, like is it really correct, for example, and then the organization of information, and then the lowest level of correction. So if trying to get feedback is like grammar, like so for us, and that's we. yeah, because that can be easily corrected, at least in this setting. Um, so yeah, so I think that's just my general thought about the you know, critical thinking and automaticity. But like in chemistry, for example, we have um I think this topic is also like if it's mother language or not is really very field specific, because in chemistry, like the term we really need to know, like I don't think there's a real conversion to a mother tongue, you know what I mean? So and so that is almost like a universal like language. So this term, we know that in science this is what it means. So as the first level, so if we so learning a new um area of science, there's really a lot of definition of terms, you know what I mean? So that and that I think is the automaticity. So the first is like really define a lot of terms, okay, and then next time you introduce it again. So I always say they have to hear it at least 8 times. It's like marketing. So it's a repeat, repeat until it makes sense. And then later you will just say the word and then they will recognize it already, what it means, what that science phenomenon is, for example. And it's really cool when, as an instructor, when the student use the correct term, when the student use the precise term instead of like, no, that's not the correct, terminology here. So, yeah, so I think they are
Dr. Mays,
definitely interrelated. Yeah.
Dr. Mays, based on your experience, do you have second language learners in your classroom? Or are they
Second
all
language.
native English speakers?
No, we have, I mean, it's not native English. So we have international students. I mean,
Okay.
our PhD program is mostly international. I think,
Oh, okay.
so
And
so that is probably, but they are advanced level, right? Our undergrad, I think we have a lot also of, Spanish speaking students, like their family, they are from that family, so, um, yeah, so it's not just one language. Um,
do
yeah,
they, do they struggle with being able to express themselves in the chemistry class, or because the terms are so technical?
it is. I mean, it's for everybody. I don't think it is, um, even our writing, it is not because of your native language. It is because science language is its own language. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, everybody is basically almost equal in that sense, except that even we have to teach our native speakers how to write properly in a scientific writing, because they think it has to be this kind of writing. You know what I mean? So the terms, I think they have some advantage, like, it just seemed a little cleaner, but I would say it's really more of the content. So if they don't know, it doesn't matter if, your um, English speaker, natural, native English speaker. So, yeah. So
What
that
about sorry, I have one more question, then I'll stop. But what about in the context of the Philippines and just developing the critical thinking skills to analyze a chemical formula or to understand the processes? And based on your own experience, Dr. Mays, would you have been better served had you started out in Cebuano and then migrated to English in later grades, or um, I'm
for
just
what? For Oh no,
just to
I think once
develop
you
the
go to the
analytical skills that make you successful later on at more advanced levels.
I mean, as so I had 2 years of experience teaching at UP Diliman, right? And I think they were generally basically, from my understanding at that time, is like, as long as everybody understands you, you can use whatever language. You know what I mean? So
Right.
so it's in Manila, so obviously you can actually use Tagalog if
Mm.
no one is gonna make you feel less like smart or something if you will express it. And I don't think students really feel like they have to. I think that is probably like the UP culture, like you as long as everybody understands. So I cannot use Bisaya obviously because like only a few will understand. So, but the thing is, once we go to chemistry, it is really English because there's no textbook that was in Tagalog, and it really helped us because I really feel that my training in Philippines is competitive globally.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Interesting.
So
Yep.
we are never confused what term because
Right.
you know what I mean? So in chemistry, like it's very clear, this is the term, this is the equation, this is, so I think in that sense we benefit. So we always feel like your chemistry in Philippines and your chemistry in US should be the same.
Right.
So I feel very trained, highly trained.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was very good sharing, Dr. Mayes. And if I got it right, I think you're saying that in the context of uh, making the message across to the other person, what's important, I mean, the language, the kind of language being utilized may not necessarily matter as long as you, the person is conveying the message. So, yeah, UP is UP. So that means you can, as long as you are conversant or you can speak the language, both Filipino or English, it doesn't matter. But in a local university like us, as mentioned by Ms. Senaban, we're really struggling as to how to make our students really speak initially, how to utilize the language. The, the standing order of our university president is that Ms. Ganaban, being the university director for language development, is to make our students speak English, at least speak English. Here we're talking about MTV and critical thinking, so that's another ladder, another step of the ladder. But we have not even um, surpass the first level of making our students speak the language, not necessarily convey message using the critical thinking or making their thinking visible. So that's really a challenge to Ms. Janaban uh, on her third year as Director of Language Development. Although there are concerns or issues in the Philippines now, I don't know if you have encountered or come across this recent issue about a university requiring the students, the president himself came up with an order through um, an announcement, which was um, lambasted by netizens because the announcement itself does not bear the correct grammar, as Ms. Dr. Mayes mentioned. The grammar doesn't matter anymore as long as the person conveys messages. So this is now uh, the um, the concern or issue being talked about by language organization in the Philippines, specifically um, the LSP or the Linguistic Society of the Philippines, whether this has really be a part of an order or a policy in an educational institution to require the students to speak English, and if they don't, uh, they will be given punishments or sort of um, deduction to their grades or whatever is the sanction for not speaking English. So that's now the debate here in the Philippines. So the recent convention sponsored by British Council in Ortigas, I was able to attend. Uh, this this is the one of the topics being discussed, whether we really have to require the students to, I mean, to come up with policy in the university or in any other educational institution for that matter. So the debate's still going on. That's why we also have, I mean, as the VPAA of the university, I also have a second thought of um, coming up with this policy, making this a legislation in the university, because we might also be criticized for espousing this kind of policy when in fact we have our mother tongue. And speaking of mother tongue, I have to tell everyone that I think DepEd is now coming up um, with a new DepEd secretary. I think in the new curriculum that will come out, mother tongue will be abolished already. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure, but I heard of that during the conference. Do we have other concern here? Uh,
So
I
ano po
don't see
yung
anything.
anong tawag niyan, metrics ng like say we are really expecting our students to be fluent in English. Meron ba yung mga metrics? How do you really say they are fluent? Like by the time they graduate. So I think
Yeah,
so yeah, so ano po yung tina-target na mga metrics to
Ah,
be to achieve those?
could I
yeah.
answer
It's
that,
Mr.
Dr.
Laban, please.
Solayo?
Yeah, yeah,
Actually,
please.
our main goal now for me, it's more of encouraging them to really express themselves in English. For example, for graduating students, the main goal is for them to be able, for example, they will be applying for a job, at least to be able to present themselves confidently by answering those questions by the future employers on, for example, on how to talk about their strengths and weaknesses, as simple as that. But actually, we don't really, for me, on my end naman, I don't really want them to, for example, in the corridor or in the cafeteria, that they have to speak with each other in English. Not really like that. Probably it's just more of when you encounter somebody in the corridor, like the like VP Solayo, Dr. Solayo, at least you know how to greet him in English, something like that. So that's siguro it's becoming a contradictory ano nga po thingy sa school, like what Dr. Solayo mentioned. Most of the students believe that they don't really have to use the English language. Siguro we also have to have more what do you call this, dealings with them to make them realize the importance of English for their future career. So they won't be able to do that if they will not practice it now, as early as now. So they we are giving them the opportunity to use the school as their training ground. But probably it's siguro, we also have to consider that since they are comfortable dealing with one another in Filipino, that yes, there are times that they can speak in Filipino, but if it is necessary, they have to speak in English. That's why I also plan to create a space that is allotted or designated places wherein they can just speak in English. But it's somehow scary. I'm kind of skeptical, thinking that nobody will go there anymore. Parang yung let's say yung Emerald, if I will assign that place for English speaking session or gathering, for sure, time will come that nobody will, visit that place anymore. Parang mga ganun po. So, ayun, so it's really contradicting. It's really a dilemma for me. Kaya am I going to, siguro it's more of siguro making them realize the importance of English for their future career. Yun po.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think it's definitely like a lot of practice. So maybe like encourage the departments to, depending on the, uh, so depending, encourage the faculty to really have more like where students present, and then maybe the presentation is in English.
In
So
English.
yeah, like cause like in our classes, it's very common here, even sa science na they will really present a topic. Yeah, alam mo yun. So i-discuss nila sa klase. So cause at least yun medyo nag-English talaga, 'di ba? So depende, so at least more discussion that, so at first usually pag mga presentation masyadong scripted, tas later the more na ano na sila, sanay na sila for presentation, then it will become more natural na hindi na sila masyadong nag-script, alam mo yun. So maybe more opportunities for that, that they can really showcase. Minsan kasi sa atin nahihiya tayo mag-English kasi
Yes.
parang kinakantsawan ka na ano ba yun, something,
Pakonyo
alam mo
effect.
yun. So kasi I think they know how, but parang feeling ko isa yan sa anong tawag niyan, barrier. Although kahit sabihin natin na okay, hindi na, we respect, but still like it's hard to overcome, right? So I think to normalize it really maybe with more, I don't know, more presentations, na talagang nagpa-practice sila in a, formal setting. Also informal setting like what you're putting, those places. Kasi sa job naman talaga, even here, if we are hiring, like offering PhD for international, we interview them through Zoom and make sure that we understand their English and they can communicate themselves in English, before we offer, like, for our international students. So
Dr.
yeah, I
Marcus,
mean that's true. Like that makes you really, like a more of a competitive globally.
yes, Dr.
Yeah.
Marcus, speaking of script, I remember when I was taking my master's in De La Salle. During that time, I was not really that confident to speak in English. And I remember my advisor when she told me that, when you present your thesis in the panel, you can come up with script first, practice it, not just once, but twice or thrice. And then after that, I really came up with the script. And then as I practice, they noticed that I improved a lot. They said you became more confident. So I think it will also work, right?
Yeah,
It
yeah, yeah. That
will
is
work.
actually,
It's like it will give you confidence to use the language. At first, you
yeah,
can really
yeah.
depend on script.
So it is actually pretty effective,
Yes, it's
like
I think for me,
especially if
based
you
on
are
my
a novice, you know
experience.
what I mean? And it's a new
Mm-mm.
topic, like and kind of like just help you with the first slide, the second slide, you know what I mean? And then you kind of get over
Yes.
your nervousness, and now you can kind of like speak it in your own. And yeah, I mean, a lot of the best practices for presentation is always like, you can have a script. Like I think we should not. I mean, for some that is really a lot helpful depending on most personalities, but I think our students probably that will help them a lot. And then practice number two, practice number three, then you can almost improvise after that, and then now it becomes natural and more fluid.
Can I
I
can I
remember like
interject?
a lot of the students here, professor always, I think it might be more American, like they don't like when it's super perfect presentation and
Oo.
almost scripted. Like I
Dr.
mean,
May?
faculty jobs here, faculty search here, I was like, they're just like, it's so perfect. Like it's so like it's good. But so yeah, but I think you get
Wala
more
akong
response
talkie.
than not, for that.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. That's
Can
a
people
very
hear
good
me?
experience. Miss Wang, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Yes, Miss
Ah,
Wang. We can hear you.
akala ko muted. Um, ano ba 'yan? Nakalimutan ko tuloy yung sasabihin ko. Hindi, gusto ko lang sabihin, pasensya na, pagka nakakaintindi ng Tagalog yung mga kausap ko, mas gusto ko talaga magsalita sa Tagalog. So, wala naman tayo sa academic setting. So, I'm sorry, Miss Dang, pero kasi yung presentation mo, it's about language naman, 'di ba? Pero pero ayun yung nawawala sa ating mga Pilipino, nawawala yung kaluluwa natin kung pinipilit niyong pag-usapan ang mga saloobin, mga bagay sa loob Yun ang language ng ating soul. Kaya kung pipilitin nyo sa pag-aaral na Ingles ang gagamitin natin, ayun yung unang mawawala. Mawawala yung identity, my understanding of myself, what I believe in, my opinions, because we think in our mother tongue. Kaya unahin muna dapat. Sa tingin ko, goals eh. So, kaya nakikinig ako, gaano karami ba yung nagke-chemistry sa Pilipinas? Gaano karami? E di, sila yung isabak mo sa English, practicein mo sa English. Gaano karami ang nagme-major sa English na magpe-present ng thesis about language and its intricacies and its purpose and its goals. BS! I'm sorry, I'm so angry now sa ginagawa ng DepEd. I'm really, really angry. Kasi, totoo naman eh, di ba? Anong kukunin mong strategy? Practice, practice. Nagpa-practice sila para magsabi ng, Sir, what would you like in your tea or in your coffee? Pinapractice yan. Test the English. Okay? So, ang una niyang isipin, bakit ba natin kailangan mag-aral ng English and to be automatic in it and to be fluent in it? Para saan? Para saan? Yon ang wala, critical thinking. Okay? So, aralin niyo critical thinking. Ay, nako. Talagang nakakapagod na. So, ang mga teachers na nandito sa ating audience ngayon ay hindi po mga college professor. Okay? At ang mga estudyante po nila ay bumabagsak, hindi nakakabasa, hindi nakakapag-isip. Dahil, ano po yun? Ang tawag natin, chicken and egg. Sasabihin mo, hindi maka-English. Ano ba yung sasabihin nila sa English? Kasi sinagkaan mo. Nilagyan mo ng block yung pag-iisip nila dahil gusto mo sabihin nila yung iniisip nila sa English. Bakit? Amerikano ka ba? Ginagamit ba nila yung English sa bahay? Tapos pag hindi makasabi ng English, hindi makasabi ng idea, sasabihin natin, bobo ang mga bata. Yan ang malaking kalokohan. Kesa po sa PLM, I'm sorry, galit na ako talaga. Galit na ako talaga. Kaya po sa PLM, Dr. Salayaw, please, aralin niyo po yung profile ng mga estudyante niyo. Nagke-chemistry po ba yan? Pupunta po ba yan sa university dito sa abroad at mag-PhD? Hindi po, di ba? Sila rin po yung kalaunan, ipapractice ng TESDA, at yes, papracticein nila yung automaticity, fluency, para sabihin, can I wipe your bum with a soft tissue or is this toilet paper okay? Yun ang inaaral nila na English at inaaral pa nila ulit dahil hindi sila natuto mag-isip sa mga eskwelahan natin. Kaya walang saysay ang pagtuturo ng English. Kaya po tayo education crisis. Alam niyo po yon, pinagkakaabalahan po natin ng panahon kung paano sila turuan ng English. Practice every day. Go and speak English only in these hallways. Parang sinabi niyo na sa kanila, magi kayong little brown brothers dahil yon. I'm sorry, I couldn't. Hindi ko na po mapigilan yung sarili ko. Mga teachers na nagtuturo po sa elementary, marami sa inyo elementary, tama ba ako? Sir Philip, Sir Ryan, sino ba yung ibang teacher na nandito? Ano po ang masasabi natin? Sir Gemma, nagtuturo sa...
We'd like to hear from the basic education teachers because I agree, most of us here are university instructors. Miss Tina Gardner is teaching English as well and Dr. Cesar Moss.
Opo. Nagtuturo po tayo sa university na pumapasok po sa college ang mga bata na hindi makasulat, hindi makaisip, walang critical thinking. Sabi na po yan ng PNU na yon. Ma'am, hindi nila maintindihan ang binabasa nila. No reading comprehension in English. Kaya, ano pang gagawin natin? Patuloy pa rin tayo. Same old, same old. Wala na nga po tayong resulta. So, ewan ko, mahirap pong magbago kasi nandiyan kayo sa sistema na, well, I'm in the English department, I'm director of this and that, and I have to speak in English, and so I will do it because that's what DepEd said, or that's what CHED said. Yun na lang po, yun po dapat yung labanan natin, yun po yung dapat kausapin natin, CHED. Napapanahon pa ba to? Kailangan ba to? Ano bang nangyayari sa ating mga bata? Hindi sila makaisip. At saka ano nangyari sa basic ed? Pagdating po nila sa college, hindi po sila maka-English. Kaya practice na lang, pilitin natin, practice dito, practice doon, mag-present ng kung ano, thesis or whatever, tapos, ang magtatrabaho lang naman pala sila, caregiver sa China. Yun lang ang kaya nating ipatrabaho sa kanila sa English na natutunan nila. Yan ang globalization natin. 10 milyon na Pilipino nagtatrabaho sa labas ng bansa. Pero ano mga trabaho nila? Caregiver, tagapunas ng puwet. Kailangan mo ba ng automaticity sa English na yon, Ma'am Dang? Kailangan mo ba ng automaticity sa mga nag-aalaga ng batang maliliit? Ano ang kailangan? Kailangan nating turuan mag-isip ang mga Pilipino. Yun ang kailangang ituro sa eskwelahan. Yun sana ang pag-ubusan nyo ng oras at panahon sa pag-iisip. How do we teach so that we are making their thinking visible, so that we know how to help them build their thinking, so we know what kind of thinking they have, how they think, how they create opinions, how they ask questions, how they make connections. Thinking visible. And you make it invisible by getting them to speak whatever it is in their hearts and minds in a language that is alien to them. Ay, sasara ko rin. Mute na po ako. I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry for being angry about this system. But I'm sorry that we are still thinking this way. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, I think it's a wake-up call also on our part, because you're there in a predominantly English language society, but we're here in the Philippines trying our best to make our students speak in English. That's why I said in my statement that it's still an ongoing debate among the scholars of, especially in the English language, English Linguistic Society of the Philippines, the Philippine Association for Language Teaching. They are now gathering here and there to talk about this contention of Ms. Wang, whether we really have to make our students, require our students to speak English elsewhere in the corridor or in the canteen or elsewhere. But we're still in a culture in the Philippines that speaking English is sort of a metrics, as mentioned by Ms. Dr. Mayes, of gauging whether a person is educated or with high critical thinking or whatever. So, but we agree with what you're saying. You're very passionate about the fact that what's important is that the student or the person can think critically and show make their thinking visible. So we continue the conversation. We have a few minutes left. Thank you. Can you hear a word from Dr. Mayes?
Yun na nga po yung sinasabi ko, Dr. Sulayaw, na at least sa UP, hindi siya like you are required. Alam mo yun, you have to express your idea. So hanggang magkaintindihan kayo or mai-convey mo yung idea mo. So English man yan or Tagalog. So I think yun talaga ang na-appreciate ko as a young instructor. Kasi parang, hindi pala kailangan. So, even natutunan ko rin yan kasi like hanggang dito. So, pag hindi maintindihan ng estudyante yung, kasi di ba, different levels, pag hindi na maintindihan, so, parang, how to connect to this student, alam mo yun? So, ano ba nga, so, okay, siguro mag-Tagalog na tayo, alam mo yun, so, hanggang magets mo yung point alam mo yun. So I think at saka yun, totoo naman yun na um I don't know, like the automatic to me is, I mean, I like the automatic, like it is very quick. But what I'm saying is like at this era of AI, we don't want to be automatic. Kasi in automatic yan ng AI. Kaya yung hindi mo automatize ng mga machine learning and AI, yun yung ikaw as a unique person. So, yun yung thinking mo. That is really the pitch for kaya yung mga lower level of thinking like grammar, pang low level na talaga yan sa amin. The quality of the thinking is the one that is the focus.
Dr. Sulayo, can I also add? Hello po.
Hello.
Actually, yes po. Kaya po kung iisipin niyo, Doc Sulayo, yung advocacy nung center na pinaglagyan sa akin, ang hirap mo po siya talaga. Di ba, kahit naman po kayo, do you agree na ang hirap niyang ma-achieve? Kasi, kumbaga, aside na nagko-contradict siya sa sarili ko, kasi I understand yung sentiments ni Ma'am Rowena. Kahit ilang beses kong tanungin yung sarili ko, parang paano mo ipipilit sa mga students na mag-English, eh pagdating naman sa house nila, ang kausap nila, parents nila, na kung saan pag nag-English sila, di ba, syempre, anong magiging reaction ng parents? Baka pagtawanan or pagalitan pa sila, anong sinasabi mo? Kausapin mo ako sa lengguwahe natin. May experience ako one time, kasi sa kasal ko to, nag-order ako ng souvenir ang na-realize ko yung place nila, nasa remote place sila. Tapos nagagalit ako, nag-i-English ako. Sabi sa akin nung nagsusupply, pwede po ba magtagalog kayo? Kasi nasa bansang Pilipinas tayo at hindi ko po kayo maunawaan. So, yung mga ganong klaseng dilemma na actually, nag-present lang naman po ako ng automaticity because I want to understand kailan maa-achieve yung pagsasalita ng English. Pero hindi ko po sinasabi na i-enforce ko or let's say, pipilitin ko yung mga bata. So, andun po ako in the middle of, susundin ko ba yung kagustuhan ng president namin? Kasi ilang beses niya na rin akong pinapagalitan kasi nga yung mga bata hindi nagsasalita ng English. At the same time, yung kumbaga wala siyang naririnig na mga English speakers sa university namin or mag-resign na lang po ba ako? Something like that. So, kaya nga po kanina ko pa pinagpipilitan na it's somehow contradicting sa side ko. Kasi I understand, especially when I had a focused group discussion, nakausap ko yung mga bata. Ang sabi nila, mahal nila ang sariling wika nila. Kaya lang, kung ipipilit yung pagsasalita ng English, medyo questionable sa kanila yon. Inilagay ko rin po yun sa study ko. And I totally agree with Ma'am Rowena when it comes to critical thinking. Kasi maganda nga na i-practice natin yung mga bata kung papaano sila mag-isip, ma-express nila yung thoughts nila. At the same time, I even mentioned earlier na I totally agree na umpisahan natin gamitin ang first language sa pagtuturo kasi kailangan muna nilang ma-absorb yung mga konsepto sa different subjects in Filipino. Like what happened in Japan. Kasi ganun sa Japan eh. Hindi naman I remember when I went to Japan, hindi sila nag-i-English. It is your task, ano mo, kumbaga, trabaho mo na mag-aral ng Japanese para kumbaga, ma-enjoy mo yung travel mo sa Japan. Hindi nila task na mag-English sila para sa'yo. So, something like that. Sa akin kasi, Ma'am Rowena, I totally understand you. Yung galit mo, naintindihan ko rin po yan. It just so happened na parang I was given a task to explain about automaticity. At iniintindi ko lang po yung parang, ang automaticity ba ay ito yung level na parang matutunan ng bata yung English. Yung automatic lang na mangyayari sa buhay nila na hindi nila kailangang um, how will I say that? Yun nga po, yung based doon sa discussion ko. But the bottom line po is that hindi po ako para pahirapan ko yung mga bata. Kaya hanggang ngayon, kahit na napapagalitan ako ng president namin, even Dr. Sulayo, medyo ano na kami, alam niyo po yun, lalo na nagkaroon ng debate. Yan nga, yung binash, yung buong university ng buong Facebook, society. Mag-worry ka eh. Kasi bakit mo mong aanuhin yung language ng ibang bansa? Bakit hindi mo nga maayos yung asignatura ng mga kabataan sa lengguwahe natin? Parang gano'n. So, I am at your side po, Ma'am Rowena. Hindi po ako
Yeah.
para sirain ang lengguwahe natin. Mahal ko po ang lengguwahe ng ating sariling bansa. Ayun po. Thank you po.
Yeah.
Oo. Thank you,
Yeah.
Manggang. I'm sorry, sumisingit na ako, pero I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Hindi ko po sinasabi na sinisira mo ang mother tongue. Hindi lang po Pilipino, marami pong ibang ginagamit ang mga Pilipino na wika. Hindi lang yung Tagalog, yung Pilipino. Yun lang po kasi yung talagang malaking kaaway natin ay nasanay po tayo na English ang ginagamit sa pagtuturo. Pero iba na po ang panahon. Pero hindi po makikinig ang DepEd sa atin kung hindi po tayo tumulak pabalik. Tinutulak nila tayo, English, English, English. Ano bang alam nila? Hindi naman sila ay nasa baba para makita kung ano ba yung nangyari na sa ating mga estudyante na college na ay hindi pa makasulat ng maayos na paragraph. At okay lang, ba't hindi okay na nagtataglish? Ganyan tayo mag-usap kasi maraming mga salita na nasa English. Computer, sasabihin mo ba? Komputadora, nagkakalito-lito ang mga tao dahil paiba-iba ng polisiya ang DepEd. Minsan mother tongue, minsan buti hindi pa nila sinasabi na kindergarten pa lang mag-English na, pero sa totoo lang po, yan na po ang ginagawa ng maraming mga magulang. Talaga pong nilalagay sila sa mga eskwelahan. Hindi eskwelahan na gaya ng Ateneo, pero yung mga quote-unquote private school. Dahil po doon ay talagang sa kindergarten pa lang, purong English na ang mga bata. Pero hindi pa nila napapag-isipan anong proficiency sa English ang naaabot ng mga batang yun. Kung ang sariling mga magulang ay hindi rin naman proficient sa English. O di makakarinig ka ng mga bata na kill the light. Mama says, kill the light. Alam mo yon? So, ang dami na pong lumabas na ganito kasi nga naghahanap tayo ng DepEd leader na may vision, yung talaga pong tumitingin talaga sa ano ba ang kailangan ng ating bayan. So, kung ganyan po, mananatiling ganyan ang ating sistema pang-edukasyon, asahan niyo na po na ang ating ekonomiya ay nagdidepende sa OFW, sa remittances ng OFW, na karamihan ay katulong, domestic helpers o caregivers o mga piyon o mason o ano pa man na hindi kailangan ang proficiency in English. Ganun kababang English lang ang kailangan nila. Yung masasabi nila na, hello, good morning, how are you, thank you. Thank you. So, hahabulin ba natin na maging proficient o maganda yung pronunciation nila nun? 'Di ba? Hindi ko alam, pero kailangan sumali po tayo sa pag-iisip kung paano natin kung paano tayo maging mabuting advocate ng epektibong pagtuturo, paraan ng pagtuturo. At yon ay hindi maging magaling sa English. Well, hindi lang. Kasi sabi ko nga, mayroon mga tao kagaya ni Dr. Mace. Diba?
Meron din tayong mga nurses, teachers.
Dami rin nating nurses na ngayon. Sinasabihan na tayo ng UK, ang pag-English ng ating mga nurses ay hindi na nila gusto. Mga call centers, na kailangan nila tama ang pronunciation talaga. Alam niyo yun? So, I don't know. Ginagawa rin naman po natin sa TESDA, di ba? Pero it's not, please, Miss Dang, I'm sorry, pumutok ako kanina, pero it's not you. It is, I'm angry about the system and I feel so helpless. Talaga po yung helplessness na nararamdaman ko kasi 25 taon na po kami nakikitrabaho sa mga tao sa DepEd. At ito na po yung mga nakikita namin at ngayon po ay nagbibigay kami ng mga suggestions, mga mungkahi, ano ang pwedeng gawin, pero hindi po tayo pinapakinggan. Wala po tayong boses, maliit po tayo. Hindi po tayo PhD sa Harvard o PhD sa Oxford University. Kaya po, alam niyo po yun. Mga teachers, I'm sorry. Makulit ako talaga sa issue na to, pero Sir Ryan, ang ating eksperto sa advocate po ng pagtuturo sa Tagalog. At least, hopefully sa mother tongue, hindi lang Tagalog, Sir Ryan, pero at least po sa basic ed, alam niyo po yon. Kahit po sa grade 1 to 4, grade 1 to 3, na talagang turuan ng critical thinking skills. Yung mga bata, pagsilitain, magbahagi kayo ng mga iniisip nyo. Kaya Dr. Solayo, talaga po yung kindergarten, yung early childhood, ayun po talaga. Doon, tulungan na yung mga bata na ano bang naiisip mo? Ano ba sa palagay mo? Ano ang nakikita mo? Ano ang gusto mong pag-aralan pa? Yun po sa level po ng kindergarten, early childhood, hanggang grade 4 at grade 3, at pag sila na po ay magaling mag-isip, gagamitin po nila yung kagalingan sa pag-iisip na yon sa pag-aaral ng second language. Kasi ang second language, hindi lang yan memorization, hindi lang yan. Yes, immersion rin. Pero dapat nakikita nila, ay, may pattern. Mayroong yung English na ganito. Iba, pareho ng tunog, pero iba ang spelling. Gagamitin nila yung pag-iisip nila sa pag-aaral ng second language.
Okay. Ms. Weng, in as much as we would like to extend further, it's almost 9 o'clock, but we would like to continue the conversation, especially hearing from Sir Ryan and Sir Philip as part of this group. Any parting message from any one of you? I think Dr. Tess is raising her hand. A few minutes, few seconds, perhaps, Dr. Tess.
Good morning. Good morning, sir. This is Tess Hermosa. For everybody, good morning. I am Dr. Tess Hermosa, also a colleague of Dr. Ganaban and Dr. Salayaw. This is a different issue. I really agree about Ma'am Rowena's side. I am on both sides. I love Filipino. I will never ignore it. But I also have to consider English. This is my explanation of why I advocate for English. Before this, though, I would want to mention about repetition. I remember during my time, there were repetitious sentences. We were asked to repeat sentences so that it becomes a master. That is about the past. Now, about the advocacy for speaking English, we advocate speaking English in our pamantasan, not because we want them to really speak in English, but because we think of their future. Now we are globalized. Everywhere the culture is speaking English. So our purpose is to make them competitive, just to be able to be well, to have good. That's it's the purpose of our students to get employed in industrial and multinational companies. And these multinational companies give out or dole out dollars. Now it is a fact that the Filipinos is still in the third world countries. That is why our families, most of our families are poor, so that we strive to earn dollars to really raise or the standards of our families. That is why our purpose is uh, teaching or guiding our students. We don't force them, we guide them to speak in English so that they will get more competitive and have the dream of their life to raise. That's the only purpose of our advocacy for English in the academy. Actually, if we were to look at everything, we have to change everything. You're right. The system, it has to begin from the beginning. So I hope you understood me. You got my thought. I will always be a Filipino, but also I will always think of the future for the betterment of my countrymen. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for those thoughts, Dr. Tess. And so before I turn you over to Sir Mitch for our next session, continuing the conversation, I'd like to say that based on today's engaging and very passionate, insightful discussion, it's clear that automaticity and critical thinking are not opposing forces actually, but rather complementary dimensions of learning. So we saw through Ms. Ganaban's experiences that once basic language tasks become automatic, learners can shift their focus to deeper comprehension, although we still have a long way to go in terms of the um, profound comprehension of our students. And it's similar to learning how to drive, as mentioned by Ms. Ganaban here. At the same time, our discussion reminded us that automaticity must be nurtured intentionally. Without thoughtful reinforcement and reflective practice, learners might develop habits that bypass comprehension or understanding. So as educators, uh, we play a crucial role in designing learning experiences that integrate practice, as mentioned by repetitive practice and reflection, ensuring that automaticity doesn't come at the expense of meaningful engagement. So in short, automaticity, as discussed by Ms. Kenaban, lays the foundation or the groundwork, and critical thinking builds upon it. So together, we go with Ms. Weng. We empower our learners not just to speak the language, but to think with it, to think through it, and to think beyond it. So to me, this is the heart of what we are fighting for, part of the 21st, so to speak, 21st century learning. So we continue the conversation in our next session. I now turn you over to Sir Mitch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks all for the discussion. I have to say that the role of language in learning is debated in every country in the world, and many countries struggle to find the right balance, but it is certainly important to come to a clear resolution about it. Anyway, we'll have our next discussion early in May, and we'll send out dates later. And for now, if you could just turn on your cameras and we will take a picture, if you could. So thank you all for attending. I hope you find it useful and interesting and prompt you to think about your teaching practices as well. That's our goal, is to help enrich all of you as you teach. Thank you.
You cook now, Red, oh. It's very slippery, my gosh. Oh,
All right, a few, or can anybody else? Wang and Dr. Hermosa and Mom Tina? All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Have a good Saturday. Enjoy yourselves, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you,
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Sir Sulayaw.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Sir
thank you,
Mitch.
Dr. Mays. Thank you,
Thank you, Doc.
everyone. Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr.
Ma'am
Mr.
Jan. Thank you,
See
Thank
Ma'am
you.
you. Thank you po.
Dr.
Bye-bye po.